So Dr. Nasha Winters,
Hi.
thank you. Hi.
We're like sweating to death here. We'll have like our living live sauna for your team today. So it's really good.
Live sauna interviews.
Yeah. Totally.
So
We're getting
good.
our little hormesis on. It's all good.
We're in the throes with everybody. We're there sweating, detoxing. We're live detoxing for you. Yeah.
Thank God you can't smell what's, it's kvetching a little bit right now.
I have oils going just in case. That's, yeah.
It's nice. Okay.
So Dr. Nasha, why do people, do clients, do patients, do anybody who has been diagnosed with cancer, why are they not given all of their options from their physician or oncologist? Why, by the time they reach us, are they saying, I didn't know food mattered. I was told that that wasn't a part of it. This is just a bonus. Is this really just a bonus?
Yeah. Well, maybe you are speaking to someone who has a very different perception and experience personally and professionally. So it is not just a bonus. A little backdrop to the why of this is, just in context, the only people that are legally allowed to say that they treat cancer are medical oncologists, radiation oncologists, surgical oncologists, and the other weird one, surgical or dentists. So dentists who do dental surgeons, because they do a lot of stuff in, with the mouth, with things like that. But if you are any other standard of care physician, PA, nurse practitioner, nurse, if you are an internist, if you are a DO, if you are a naturopathic chiropractor, an integrative, practitioner, and you say you work or treat cancer, that is actually considered illegal and a problem. So what I'm always trying to explain to patients and their families and their team, their tribe, which we'll talk about the importance of that here in a moment too, is that you have then a very small piece. So you got this big pie with you in the center, and this one tiny sliver of that pie is your tumor expert, be that the oncologist from a radiation medical, meaning chemotherapeutic or surgical mindset, okay, that has that official training, fellowship, residency, like that whole thing that can qualify themselves to be a person who treats your cancer. And that's exactly what they do. They treat the cancer cell and the cancer tumor. Now, I might have a bit of an opinion about this, that I'm not even certain they do that very well in some situations. This is not to diss all, but that this sort of 70-year experiment, and this for sure 50-year experiment, since we defined the war on cancer in 1971, the year of my birth, ironically, is that we have not made big headway in this arena. You might read some sensationalized headlines and articles saying, we're finally making a dent. Now, there are a lot of people out there who say that dent may just be that we're getting earlier diagnostics, and earlier diagnostics of people that otherwise would have died maybe with the cancer, not of the cancer, or that it might have gone into remission on its own without anybody knowing. And that if you really kind of dig and poke and prod in every single one of us, you will likely find cancer, because guess what? We all have it all of the time. All of us, without fail. It is part of us. It is not an external invader that shows up overnight and suddenly you're in trouble. It's something that by the time it is big enough and loud enough and out of balance enough to capture the attention of you or your practitioner, it's been on board an average of 7 to 10 years. So that's context that everybody needs to know right there. Your medical oncologist, radiologist, or surgeon has an expertise to deal with that growth that showed up over the last 7 to 10 years, but they have no expertise and no training into how it took off to begin with. You have less than 25% of all medical schools even offering a single elective course in nutrition. Okay. And I will tell you, as someone who went through medical school, the last thing you want to do is to do an elective course when you could be sleeping, relaxing, studying, cramming for other things. Like, you're not going to be the doctor inclined to go and take that really BS extracurricular course in nutrition that's very outdated nutrition information at best. Okay, so you are willing as a patient to take the advice of someone who's had zero training in you, in your terrain, and in nutrition specifically, and how you treat and change and support this terrain. So that's where the importance of a team comes in. So if you have a doctor saying, nope, no way does food help, that's because the blinders they have on has taught them that. Despite the fact that they pulled the blinders, peeled even one of them off, and started to do a very simple PubMed search on nutrition's impact on cancer, there's actually multiple meta-analyses, there's multiple cohort studies, there's multiple individual nutrients and nutrient targets, multiple even cancer types, for instance. Like just 2 weeks ago, we had a study showing that KRAS mutations of cancer cells are highly responsive when you do a combination of high dose IV vitamin C, which is a mega dose of a particular nutrient, along with intermittent fasting. Mm-hmm. So when you're in a fasted state, there's a level of stress on the cancer cells in the body. And then you add to that stress an extra layer with IV vitamin C at high doses acts oxidatively. It acts like an oxidative stress, a cytotoxic stress. You have these vulnerable cancer cells that can't adapt when they're not being exposed to their favorite fuel sources. And then you bring in the Trojan horse of a therapy that is very, very oxidative to those cells. And our healthy cells have little things on their cell walls that break down the peroxides that are being pushed by the high dose IVC so that they can adapt and not be destroyed and obliterated along with the cancer cells. When exposed to high doses of vitamin C, they get fortified and reinforced and invigorated, especially in the face of fasting. And the cancer cells get kind of weak and vulnerable, and they don't have the ability to deal with that oxidative stress load that the vitamin C is bringing on board, and they pop. They swell and pop. They lyse. And so that's a really cool thing when you have someone telling you nutrition doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. You can just simply blow off blow on the dye, the toner on that fresh piece of paper research that came out a couple of weeks ago and be like, yeah, why don't you read this? Careful, it's going to smudge because it's so fresh, right? And then we go back decades and decades back to the father of orthomolecular medicine, Dr. Abram Hoffer, who was one of my mentors and professors, and people like Linus Pauling and others who were showing 20s and 30s that the high doses of certain nutrients can have direct impact on our cell functioning in all chronic illness. We've been able to show fast forward into, so many areas of the nutritional constituents of things like EGCG, which is the catechins of green tea, or the polyphenols of coffee and chocolate, the things like the sulforaphanes of your cruciferous vegetable family and their direct impact on the p53 tumor suppressor gene. I mean, my God, it's endless, actually, how many studies are out there showing specific constituents of food and their direct impact on certain cell lines or certain molecular markers. But when you look at the big picture, that's when it starts to get kind of wonky out there. So Dr. Richard Feynman wrote an excellent book a couple years ago. It's been out, well, maybe not even quite, maybe just shy of 2 years it's been out, called Nutrition in Crisis. And I would really strongly encourage your listeners to read this book because it helps you understand why we are still having these conversations. It helps you start to understand why we don't have good definitive data to show nutrition good, nutrition bad, makes a difference, doesn't make a difference. And he really goes into the broken medical system and the broken model, and even the powers that be and the conflicts of interest that are involved in such research projects. So you have all these camps out there today saying veganism, good. Others saying carnivorism, good. Some saying keto, good. Some saying paleo, good. Some saying whatever. You'll notice no one way, right? Mm-hmm. But what we can all sort of decide upon based on the literature, based on the N=1 of our patients, based on the volumes of tissue assays and epigenetic testing and blood testing that I'm evaluating in every one of these folks, is you start to see trends and certain patterns over time. And we've lost our ability to be observers and to have critical thinking skills. That's again, that spoon-fed educational system. Even medical school is very spoon-fed and algorithmic, and that it's like, I just need to get through this, pass my exams, and just get out into the real world. Stop thinking outside the box. Only think on what's in that statistical little, curve to know that this is what I need to focus on. And yet, most of our patients live outside that curve, right? If they were the responders within that curve, they wouldn't be your patient, right? They wouldn't be seeing you.
So
yeah.
I just want to back up just a quick second in case somebody missed this, but you said it takes maybe 7 years, 8 years, 10 years before we even detect that we have this growth that has just developed into a mad ball of cancer, right? Or whatever the diagnosis might be. So for one, we don't have to rush into any type of treatment. We do have time to explore and understand what this means, and perhaps read Nutrition in Crisis. We have some time to read a book.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And here's the thing is there are, whenever you kind of say it's this way, there's always caveats to that. So there are those extremely rare occasions where cancer is a medical emergency. Specifically, if you have a space occupying lesion that's leading to seizures, say, or a small bowel obstruction that stopped everything moving and you've got, nothing moving south and everything moving north, those are problems. Or a biliary obstruction that's causing your liver to back up and stop functioning, or that something's pushing against the ureters of your kidney and causing a reflux there that's causing problems. Obviously, those are medical emergencies that need to be dealt with. But the other honesty of that is it's extremely rare for something to be that big and that blatant, unless you are so disembodied and have not paid one iota attention to your body beings, everything. For you to get to that point, there's always some symptoms before that. And I'll meet people and I'll work with people who say, even with the medical emergencies, they say, honestly, I had no symptoms. But as we start to dig, they're like, I guess actually I kind of just thought it was a backache for a while. Or, it was kind of weird to me that my poop started becoming more and more narrow. Or, I was having these really rank belches that were, there's always something. We just have become so, what's the word? We've been taught to ignore, to put that sticker on the check engine light for so long that we've started to think that whatever we're feeling is normal, or we have some excuse or justification for it. And so what you and I are trying to push people to do is to dig deeper, think deeper, connect deeper, know thyself deeper. And so when you talk about that, once you have had the diagnosis, oftentimes the real medical emergency is the diagnosis itself, because that's going to invoke something within each person on an individual level. For some people, it's going to create a freeze frame. They're going to be like the deer in headlights. Like, for other people, it's going to set them off on this fight, kill, kill, kill place. For some people, it's going to totally disembody them and they're just like checked out. For some people, it's going to be like, I'm just going to pray this away, which really powerful tool, except for prayer is meant to empower us and help give us the insights and the clarity to find our next steps, not just sit there and wait. I love that analogy of, the flood's coming and the person's up on the second floor and someone's like, do you need help? I can send a boat. And like, nope, waiting for God. Got this coming. And then they're up on the top and someone comes by in a little boat. Do you need help? Nope, waiting for God. Then later on the helicopter comes and you need some, nope, waiting for God. And then finally, they're flooded, they're dead, they're in heaven. And God's like, what? I came to you 3 times. It's like, we are taught, we pray to find resource. We pray to find clarity. And so, when people just like Pollyanna, I'm just going to wish magical unicorn, think it away. That is just as dangerous as those who are overzealously kill, because that is you. That's something that's gone amok in there. And so the way we respond at that diagnosis can be very instrumental in our prognosis. So of course there's a shock factor and we all need to honor that piece as well. But there's also the moment that instead of reacting, which most of us will do, we need to sit back, take a breath, collect the data about ourselves individually, understand where we came from to get to that point and where we need to go very specifically to help bring balance into our bodies and being. And that can take you anywhere from several days to several weeks to several months. And most of the time, unless those really rare medical emergencies we talked about a moment ago, you have plenty of time to find all the right resources. So when I get an email from someone saying, I just saw your podcast and this was really great, and I'm scheduled for surgery on Thursday for this, at that moment, I literally will say, you are going to do whatever you're going to do, but here's my advice. Go on my website, drnasha.com, download my 5 steps after you're diagnosed with cancer. Go back to those and see if you fulfilled those 5 steps before you dive into this surgery. I would personally postpone that surgery. I would personally do some more homework, because once you start that, the ball is in motion. It is so much harder to backtrack, to stop the madness, to stop the chaos, to get off that assembly line, completely statistic-centric, fear-mongering place that you can't turn around. Right?
And you have every right to. Everybody has the right to do that. You have the right to say, this doesn't feel comfortable. I'm not good with this. I don't agree. I want to look into something else. I need more time. I'm not sure you're the one for me. You have the right to be the CEO of you. You employ all of these doctors and oncologists and radiologists, and it's your team. And if you're working with a doctor that doesn't want to engage with Dr. Nasha's suggestions or recommendations, but you want them to, then that's your responsibility to find another oncologist. Because what happens, Dr. Nasha, if we're not comfortable and we don't have faith in the treatment protocol that we're going with? What happens then? We're screwed.
Yes, because our cells are actively listening to us, and our response and reactions are what drive the boat, right? Consciously and unconsciously. And it's in those moments that you may, after doing all your homework, take that moment, take that breath, that you may actually do the exact treatment that was offered to you, because that might be, after all your research, like, that is exactly what I need to do and want to do. But if you don't achieve that choice from your own due diligence, you will be wondering, questioning, regretting that decision forever. Because this is what happens when I see a patient who's, quote unquote, done everything they were told to do from the get-go. And now I'm seeing them 2 years, 5 years, 6 years later, when it's recurred, it's progressing, and now it's really out of control. The biggest demon we do battle with in those moments is their regret. And their feeling of being disempowered, disenfranchised, that they didn't listen to themselves, their anger at themselves, their anger at the world around them, which is also really toxic, right? Is now they're trying to, it's like, okay, that was the past. Now you're doing something very different. So this is where we are today, why we're here today. Now what? I'm always like, it's okay to get the story. It's okay to find the story, but we are not defined by the story. The story can be changed. The next page can be a whole new story. So it helps to understand where we came from, to understand where we arrived at this moment in time, because it is just that. And then you get to help rewrite the story that moment on. It hasn't been done yet. It's up to you entirely. And so the patients that take the moment, in my experience, to take that power back and find out the why and decide from all the pools of resources that are out there for them what is right for them, with a well-vetted, educated decision process, they're going to have your best outcomes. These are the folks I don't see come back for a recurrence. These are the folks that have a really good response through treatment, because they're keeping their head above water from the side effects. They know how to pair the best of both worlds together. We have some that have certain tissue types that really Western medicine offers them maybe a 2% chance of response with the standard of care offerings. And the patient's like, I'm not sure if I'm willing to put myself through all of that with that low of a response rate. So I definitely have to, color outside the lines, and figure out what's going on there. So we see that. We also see patients who, like, even in my own situation, there is nothing we can do for you. It's too far gone. It's best to take a palliative or a hospice approach. Sometimes those are honestly my favorites, because there is nothing there except for a surrender to it's like, okay, so if this is it, I'm going to die with dignity. I'm going to figure out, I'm going to have my eyes wide open going to this process. And guess what? Sometimes that can be exactly the ignition that brings people back to life. I've seen that over and over. These are the people that Kelly Turner studied, the 10,000, people with radical remissions, and in her follow-up book, Radical Hope, who she's still following, to see people who were given an otherwise dire diagnosis who, out of the 9 factors, maybe diet and supplements helped a little, but the 7 main factors have nothing to do with what you ingest or what treatment you do or what pill you pop.
Mm-hmm.
It is so much bigger than that. It is so much of a deepening understanding of who you are, where you came from, where you want to go, what your passion and purpose, are, what you came here to do, where it got lost in the shuffle, where the communication broke down, figure that out and address it. Go pull those weeds out of the garden, amend the soil, and start over. Grow something brand spanking new within. And that is what is most challenging for people. Because guess what? Standard of care is the easy way out.
Uh-huh.
I'm just going to go in, I'm going to get into their assembly line. I'm going to come in, I'm going to get my cookie while I get my IV for my, my medicines to take that. I'm going to check my labs every, the day or so before I go in for another chemo to make sure I've got the right amount of white blood cells for me to get my next round. And then at the end, I'm going to ring the bell and I'm going to be done. I just get to they just get to do to me, and I just get to sit there and receive it in that chair.
Just take it.
That's 70% of those patients will have a recurrence.
Mm-hmm.
That's not my statistic. I don't know why people aren't out in the streets protesting that, because that seems so negligent.
Thank you.
And so unethical to me on so many levels. It's like, how are we not questioning that? So it's those patients who, if they opt to be in that chair, they need to figure out why. They need to do whatever they can to support them through that process. And they need to sure as hell clean it up after that therapy, which is taking an already damaged metabolic mitochondrial terrain and adding insult to injury, which the miracle to me is that not more than 70% of people have a recurrence after putting that much destruction to the mitochondria continues with this standard of care treatments.
Well, isn't
that a miracle?
Isn't that 70% within 5 years though?
Not even a data, because like most breast cancers don't recur until 10 to 15 years after. So I have all these young women thinking they're fine and they're out there living life. And then talk about the rage and the dismay and shock when it's back. And they're like, but I did everything they said. And when I hit the 5-year mark, I'm cured. That's the only disease process we say that if you've not died by year 5, even if you're still cancerous, they call that a cure.
Right. So we're even higher than that, because if the measurement is within 5 years, but they're having recurrences 8, 10, 15 years later, then that 70% is way higher.
We stop looking after 5.
Right. Yeah. Right. Again, it's in the box. So
we're shaving the data. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So aside from that, when we're talking about, when I say the word holistic, that is still scary to a lot of people. The word holistic.
Why don't we use the word comprehensive?
Comprehensive. Right. Okay.
Holistic does have a certain connotation. So does alternative. And I think of this as comprehensive. Like you've got your tumor experts. Who's your terrain expert? Who's your spiritual expert? Who's your nutritional expert? Who's your physical, like the physical health expert, be it a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, a trainer, be it a body worker, like who are the people who know those elements of your body, mind, and soul, who can see the rest of that? Because you're definitely not having your oncologist ask you about your ACE score, your adverse childhood event score, maybe what chronological traumas led up to the 6 months to 2 years prior to this finally taking off and being big enough and loud enough for us to see it. Like based on the work of Dr. Lawrence Lashan and some of the others out there in the field theory and psychology and epigenetics world of what triggers and sparks these things into being. That's not where their training was. They did not have training. They learned a somatic approach to cancer, which is a genetic variation, which is less than 5% of the population. And yet 95% of the people that come through their door have an epigenetic dietary lifestyle influence on their reason for being in your chemo chair. And so they don't have training in that 95%, variables that are feeding this. And so when it's very algorithmic of you have this tumor type, so it's like what tissue, which histology is it? Is it an adenocarcinoma? Is it a sarcoma? Is it an epithelial based? So like they look at the tissue type and they're like, okay, and then the region of the body, did it land in the breast or the colon or the pancreas? Okay, great. So then that you just open up the cookbook, the algorithm, and you're like, okay, so with this tissue type in this region of the body, we give this treatment. And yet you take 10 women with invasive ductal carcinoma, stage 2B, with some lymphatic and possible microvascular components that are perimenopausal, all in the same age window, all with the same number of children, but they live in different zip codes. And they have different reasons. Like some of those women, they had very easy fertility, no problem. Some of them had to do IVF. Some of them had a few miscarriages along the way. You start to look at their epigenetics and you start to go, wow, this person has MTHFR. So there's a lot of issues around thyroid and how they methylate and detoxify toxins. And when this person has a lot of COMT, so they're really functioning from a place of stress, really impacts their health. Well, and this person has a lot of CYP1B1 and CYP1A1 issues. This is where all hormones are really not, they are not working well in this person's body. And then you look at their relationships. One has a very deep, great supportive, marriage. Another one is a single mom on her own. Another one is in a totally loveless, toxic marriage or has a spouse that's not there for them or whatever level. You start to look at those variables, and I'm getting just some examples of this, and you start to realize, wow, these are not the same cancers. They did not land at this point, even though on paper, from pathology and histology, they look the same. There's no, it's like snowflakes. There is absolutely no two alike. And that's what we are not like able to do in a standard of care practice environment, is start to differentiate those 10 women from one another and start to help them understand, okay, this is where you came from and got you to this point. Now your path forward will look different than this person who got here from this point of view. And so when people are like, well, what do you do for stage 3B, blah, blah, blah cancer? I'm like, I don't do anything for that. I do a deep dive and I find out what made their terrain sick and got them to this point. And then we have a roadmap out. Pretty straightforward. And it's different. I mean, every single day I get that question. And it's like, you'd think after a while, people have listened to the hundreds and hundreds of podcasts and interviews and read my book and met my patients and met the doctors I've trained and heard me present at medical conferences and inform on research projects, to realize I'm always going to say, test, assess, address, don't guess. No two are the same. We do not treat cancer. We treat the terrain. And those who are expert at treating the tumor or the thing, great, stay in your lane. Unless you want to come over and learn a bunch of what I know, because I have to learn a bunch of what you know, so I can better understand what your treatments are doing to the terrain. So I can also help support that patient as well. So I can help your therapies work better by understanding the big picture. Guess what? It'd be really refreshing if you would come over and take a peek in this other side and understand that the terrain is integral. Thank you to people like Dr. Mina Bissell, who's been an oncology researcher 35, 40 years in the making, to say, guys, what was interesting here is the Petri dish medium that those cells are growing in seems to have a bigger impact on what those cancer cells are doing versus the cancer cells themselves and what you're injecting into those cancer cells. Like, she's been saying that for decades. Or the people who are transferring out the nuclei of your mitochondria, basically the hard drive, and saying, if this was truly genetic and we took out the hard drive and we put it into we took the cancerous hard drive out of one mitochondria, we put it into a healthy mitochondria. If this was in fact a genetic disorder, we would turn that healthy mitochondria into a cancerous process. And yet we don't. What's interesting is that little hard drive put into a healthy environment, healthy Petri dish, turns back off and becomes a healthy cell again. But if you then took the healthy hard drive of a healthy mitochondria and you put it into the soup of a toxic cancerous cell environment, that mitochondria shifts over and becomes a cancerous mitochondria. That is the difference, where we are still doing all of standard of care medicine today based on an outdated theory somatic theory of cancer, which it's not to say it's not involved in some way, but it is certainly not the whole enchilada. In fact, I think it's a teeny sliver of it, in my own opinion, in my own experience. But instead, what we need to look at is that petri dish within each of us.
So like you said, though, we're not out protesting it. Nobody's holding up signs saying, why do statistics still look today the way they did 50 years ago? Because too many people are not paying attention to this type of information until they're actually diagnosed with it. So why are we saying the same things every single month after month, week after week, that we were saying 10 and you were saying, 20, 30 years ago, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
People wait until it affects them.
And that's just, I mean, that's actually, we are seeing kind of a global crisis, that it's like, until it lands in your home or in your body, whatever the travesty may be, whatever the condition, the diagnosis, the situation may be, until you are directly impacted. I don't know why we have to wait to get to that point. It seems so insane to me, because I can scream from the rooftops, it doesn't have to be that way. And yet human nature, I mean, I can't even tell you. I mean, just literally as we're talking, I just got a text from someone. I've been caring for her husband's cancer. Well, not I've been caring for her husband, so when I first met him, he came to me with prostate cancer. He started cleaning up his terrain at that time. This guy turned everything around in his life. Fast forward a few years, I don't hear from him for a while, a couple of major stressors, big changes, moved to some very toxic environments. Now they're calling me in a panic, because now he's diagnosed with melanoma, stage 4. Something they forgot to tell me, something that was incidental, is that he'd had a previous melanoma. But because of Western medicine, they sort of well, we cut it, it's all gone, it's good to go. But they didn't teach him is that melanoma has a 90% recurrence rate. And when it recurs, it's explosive and dangerous. Had I known that was part of his terrain history, so I'm always I'm really pushing patients. My history taking is far better. That was someone 15 years ago, right? When that was happening. I've learned now to ask different questions, right? You won't get your answers unless you ask different questions. So this guy, miraculously, MD Anderson still shakes her head and can't understand why. He is alive when everyone else in his clinical trial is dead. Every other person. And we're talking years, 4 years into it now. Stage 4, melanoma, mets everywhere. He did a targeted, immune therapy, but he'd be dead today had he not done all the other things. Just everyone else who did it, hook, line, and sinker, are dead. That sounds harsh, but that's reality. So we've spent so much time focusing on his terrain, that in the midst of all of that and all of our focus on him and his partner's entire focus on him, and I've been telling her for over a decade, I'm concerned about you and all of this. Where are you in all of this? I literally just got a text that she's just been diagnosed with endometrial cancer. And so here it is. She has neglected her own, because she had fertility issues. She couldn't have a baby. And then her husband's died, mortality in their face, the stressors of that, the loss of furry loved ones over the time, the loss of homes and places they wanted to live, a lot of loss, including babies, and never being able to be that mother and co-create. Of course her endometrium is crying. Of course her uterus is grieving. Of course this is it, because she's put all of her focus and all of her care and all of her attention on her partner and not herself. These are the things that catch us unaware. We have to keep tending to our own gardens. We have to, because that is the number one, in the cancer personality, it's so much everything's external, everything's out there. I need to focus out there. And that's when it catches you off guard. It's how is it that I was so busy feeding him, nourishing him, keeping his ass alive, and now I'm dealing with the same thing? Now, the beautiful thing is she knows exactly what not to do.
Yeah.
So she's coming at it eyes wide open, and she's not jumping in. She knows the record at this point, and she knows she will be a different statistic. She is super clear on that. But it's still sad that it took this for her to go, oh my God, you've been telling me for a decade to pay attention to myself and take care of myself, and I've ignored that. Right?
And that's a prime example of the importance or the critical component to having a healing team.
Exactly. It should not all be on your partner.
Right.
Or on your one doctor.
Right.
It should be bring them all. It would have been great, but he leaned very heavily on her and she leaned very heavily into him. Sure. It was a very codependent process. That field of their relationship didn't get did not get amended in the process of his own miraculous healing from this. So that field of still like stuck in sort of the cancer miasm, the cancer, terrain milieu is still among their world.
Which speaks volumes too for the emotional component too. So in my experience, it's one of the most brushed under the rug topics. People understand it, but they don't know what to do about it. It's so hard to address it. It's painful.
Yes. And yeah, to heal, you have to be uncomfortable.
Uh, so
and people, we're again, that we're kind of going there earlier. It's like, everyone's like, oh, just take the pill. Yeah, you'll throw up a little bit. It'll be kind of, but no one's asking you to completely change everything in your world. You have to.
mm-hmm.
You don't get this sick without there being a lot of working parts, infusing that into a system. You can't get well then by one single treatment.
Mm-mm.
Or one dietary change or one pill or one chemo. So like, there's so many things that have played into this for so long. You're just starting to peel back the layers, and that's where it gets uncomfortable.
Yeah. So when you're putting together your healing team, you want to make sure, we're going to use the word comprehensive. So when you're putting together your comprehensive healing team, you have to take a look at what are the characteristics of somebody who has already taken a comprehensive healing approach and has healed. They didn't only do the what can I put into motion, like what can I eat, what are the action steps I can take. There's a lot of the emotional, spiritual, psychological well-being that if that's not addressed, you can do all the things like to perfection. But when we ignore that, the spiritual, our soul, our whole reason for being, when we don't give attention to healing that part of it too, when you don't include somebody to help guide you on your recovery path, in your psychological, spiritual regeneration, that's going to be a very, very painful journey.
It is. And I'll tell you, there are some people who it is far easier to leave this planet than to deal with some of those pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And the beauty of this is we are all given our own soul contract. So it's really up to us to determine when the expiration date happens to some degree, right? There's things that are obviously out of our control, like you getting hit by a car, like things like that. But really, when you start to get into those places, I've had so many experiences in my career where I realized that really overcoming the resentment or the betrayal in whatever relationship it was with a parent, a partner, a child, a business partner,
a parent,
right? It's like, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Those are really, those create crises on a deep level, and the cells don't know time or space when exposed to that. It's like, it's still, that person's name gets mentioned and the trauma is like right there again for them. It's like, these are the pieces that without some concerted effort, probably some professional support, it doesn't just go away. You can't just wish it away and you can like, I'm just going to write this one little journal thing and burn it and I'm good. I mean, I wish it was that easy. If it was, we'd all be miraculously healed all the time. But it's an ongoing, like even my own journey, almost 29 years into this process, I am constantly unearthing things that surprise me about myself. Like, it's like, wow, I had no idea. Like, that's humbling. Why I didn't realize, I thought that was done. I thought I dealt with this. Didn't realize until it was given another opportunity to take a look at it in another way. When we're really pushed against our own, comfort zone, our own mortality, the mortality of the world around us, when we're pushed up against that, it's in those moments of stressors that we get to see what we're really made of. And we get to realize, well, I'm coming from a place of reactivity versus getting quiet and still and responding or not responding. Sometimes the best response is no response, right? And so this is the place when I find myself, when I react, I know I am not in alignment with my higher, like with who I am. And it's hard because I'm a fiery redhead, I'm like an aging redhead, so you don't get to see that fire, but it was definitely fiery orange all my life. And so I have this intense passion, this intense fire, and definitely you do not want to piss off a redhead because our anger is swift and sharp. But at the same time, as soon as it's cleared from me, I'm like, and I'm good, great, that was great. And other people are like, singed eyebrows, like, that was intense. And I'm like on to the next thing. And like, wait a minute. I've had to learn that the way I process it, I also need to temper it a bit so it's gentle and loving. And my intent is coming through that, yes, that's not okay. Know that boundary was crossed and that's not okay. But I can also articulate it in a way that is kind and loving and not hurtful. And I've had to learn that and teach that to myself. And when I find myself in that reactivity, I have to ask myself questions like, where am I out of integrity? What is that person bringing up in me? What are they reminding me that I have yet to heal? So just like a particular diagnosis or situation, you're like, oh my gosh, we're here again. What is it still trying to tell me? What is the opportunity here? And if we all took that moment to just kind of, before reacting, getting quiet and reflecting, and then responding, probably would have some very different experiences in this world.
Well, in addition to that, too, the way that we think about ourselves and the way that we are constantly labeling and battering and just beating ourselves, when you find yourself in the heat of that moment, stop and think and realize what you're doing. And it just like that, you can switch your thoughts. Your cells hear every thought that you're thinking. You can turn around your whole day. You can turn a day of destruction into a day of regeneration and healing just by choosing your thoughts in a different pattern.
Exactly. Well, and it's funny how we are often the nastiest to ourselves.
Yeah.
And you think to yourself, you actually heard your inner thoughts out loud being directed at another, you would be mortified.
Mm-hmm.
You would probably be the person like shielding them physically and energetically from those to that tone.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, why do we allow ourselves to have those conversations with ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One last thing I want to talk about. So when you're putting together your healing team, if you're going to have a very comprehensive approach to your healing, you'll have your medical component. You will have somebody to work with that's going to discuss more comprehensive type testing to test, assess, and address, correct?
Yep.
And then you might want to incorporate somebody who is able to guide you through your day.
Exactly. Huge, like a patient advocate, a lifestyle coach, a keto coach, a metabolic coach, someone who has
a cancer coach.
Exactly. Let me help you go through your pantry. Let me help you go through your medicine cabinet. Let me help you look under the kitchen sink and see what things might be hidden in there. Let's take a walk around your property. Let's look around. Oh, look, I see that you've got the big thing of Roundup right there. Where are you using that on the household? Right. Like, these are the things of what you put in, on, and around you is definitely having your biggest impact. Then look at what's in a 2-mile radius of your home.
Mm-hmm.
Look at that. Then look at your zip code through things like scorecard.org,
Mm-hmm.
ewg.org, or even the EPA Superfund sites, and find out what's within your community that you're being exposed to in air, soil, and water. Those are important. And then start to become an advocate, like what's the word I'm looking for? An activist, and changing that for yourself and your community. Then, most difficult, look at the 5 closest people that you spend the majority of your time with.
Yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Because we are the reflection, we are the expression of the 5 closest people in your circle.
That's what I tell my kids all the time. You are the total. You are the sum of that whole group that you're rolling with.
Exactly. And so if you love that person, but they are really in a broken place right now, and every time you step into them, it's like destruction follows wherever, it's like you are choosing that each time. And so some of the most painful experiences I've had in my lifetime were stepping out of those like cyclones of destruction of people that I love to this day very, very much.
Family. Yeah, it can be family.
Friends, business partners, so many things. It's like we cannot heal in that environment. We can't. And so you have to also take breaks. So I did a family fast for 2 years.
Yeah.
I've stepped away from business partnerships. I've stepped away from romantic relationships. I've reconfigured my marriage multiple times over, 19 years married and almost 30 years together, because we aren't the same people we were when we got together.
Right.
So we need to reinstate our contract. We literally reassess our contract annually, you know? And I want, you know, like in life itself, there's times I'm like, I'm ready to just burn this contract and move on. And the opportunity, if you have a willing participant to work through whatever you're up against, it can be profoundly healing and life-changing for both parties. If you're like, this is hard, I know it. This is hard, I know it. I'm not happy where I am right now. Neither am I. What are we going to do about it? Cool. Break through together. But if you have a non-willing participant or group of participants, that will drive you crazy. That's where like going to family dinner can be incredibly poisonous. I will not even kid you when I tell you how many labs, because I watch labs monthly for my patients who are ongoing cancering, and you will see over the holidays, massive spikes in progression, massive spikes in cancer, you know, markers, massive, and it's like, what happened? They're like, family dinner. You know, it's like, and is your terrain strong enough right now to expose yourself to that toxicity?
And the diagnosis around that time of the year too.
Always, always. And there's so many variables, the light, the D3, the sugar intake, the stressors, you know, all those things, the viruses that kick up at that time that also are triggers for cancer processes. It's huge. And we don't take that into account. But those are the things you want. Definitely want someone who help bring some accountability to your world. Some hand-holding of helping you set up some logistics, some new structure and new routines and new patterns, and help you reinvent your day-to-day. Those are really powerful tools to have. So a cancer coach, a metabolic, whatever that label may be, of someone who's got some practice under their wings of knowing how to support people to make the changes necessary. Like, how do you get rid of all the plastic in your house and the Teflon? And how do you start to think about quality water and air quality in your home? And how do you start to think about what you're putting on your body, be it from material to body care products? And what, you know, like those things become so mindless. I mean, it's weird when I go now to somebody's house. I mean, I always tell people this: if I'm coming to your home, I promise you, I will be looking in your medicine cabinet. I will be looking in your pantry. I'll be looking in your fridge, because I can tell so much. I wish doctors still did house calls.
I know.
I think we'd have a very different patient population today if we were still doing that, because there's this level of everyone tells you what they think you want to hear, but you show up and you see the clutter in their house, the stuff that's piled up, the hoarding going on, the consumerism going on. You're like, that's happening on a cellular level too. Right? You go into their fridge and they're telling you they're eating vegetables. The only thing I see in there are like, you know, leftover styrofoam containers from fast food and eating out. And I open up the pantry and there's nothing but like processed food, boxes, chemicals, you know. So these are things you've got to help people totally reinvent.
Yep. So you need your coach to walk you through the day-to-day, because you cannot call Dr. Nasha on a daily basis and expect her to tell you what you should be filling your grocery cart with or slathering all over your body. Sunscreen versus body lotions. That's not her job.
And I did it for many years and it fried me, because I was saying the same thing over and over, and it took time. But I used to have patients meet me on a Saturday morning at the grocery store and say, come with me. Meet me here if you want to see what I'm putting in my cart. Follow me around.
Line them up, right?
It was a blast. And all the health food stores in my town loved it. Like it was really fun, but it also became this place of people see it, but it's like you need someone in there holding your hand a lot more than I could offer in those little moments.
Yeah. So you are a naturopathic doctor.
Correct.
That is very misunderstood.
It is.
Because there's a lot of titles, and there's a lot of people that take that title that have not received the same education that you have. So when putting together your healing team, you have to be very conscious.
Buyer beware.
Yes.
Yeah. So for a trained naturopathic doctor, we went to a 4-year medical school, who also had to have a pre-med process to get into medical school, and then has the proper amount of continuing education. We have to take the same type of testing to get us into clinic and then beyond clinic, just like the USMLE boards for medical doctors. And then we typically have our residencies and our fellowships and our specialties to follow. And we have to have our ongoing continuing education and our malpractice insurance and yada, yada, yada. I mean, we're looking at, hundreds of thousands of dollars invested into our education, into the time, as well as maintenance of those credentials. You need to make sure you have someone who has frankly put their skin in the game to get that knowledge and education. And I did my rotations in hospitals, ERs, surgical centers, HIV clinics. I did hands-on care. The people getting their stuff from a Cracker Jack box or a certification online, diploma mill. First of all, that's so unethical on so many levels. I have no problem if you want to go and get that education just for fun, but when they start to call themselves something they're not, and they give a false sense of that they're a doctor. A doctor is someone who's done 4 extra years of post undergraduate education, period. Whether you become a doctor of law, become a doctorate of psychology, it doesn't matter. That's a 4-year post undergraduate education, period, right? So that is a level of expertise. And then on top of that, I also did a deeper credentialing and deeper focus in how to meet all the requirements of a fellowship in the American Board of Naturopathic Oncology. So even as a naturopathic doctor, there are subspecialties, and there are a lot of people who are really excellent at oncology that are not FABNOs. And there's only, and those are a handful. Some of those are my mentors and friends, but you still need to be buyer beware. So if you have someone saying they're an expert in oncology and they took they're an MD, took a weekend functional medicine course, or they're a diploma mill naturopathic doctor, or they're a naturopath who happens to see a few things, but they haven't been to a oncology conference in the last decade, and they're incredibly far behind in the information that's coming out exponentially every week, you probably want to go elsewhere. So you want to ask your questions, you want to do your homework, you want to find out how many people they've seen. At this point in my career, I stopped taking direct patients in the clinical setting in 2014. I stopped doing consulting directly with patients in 2018. I now train physicians worldwide. I now inform and am an investigator on multiple research trials all over the world. We're building a hospital, for crying out loud, some metabolic approach to cancer forward thinking hospital, 250,000 square feet with every tool under the sun, under our roof, that will be based on the individual's needs, not the standard of care needs, because there isn't a standard of care. There is an informed amount of care that should be addressed for each and every patient. And we will be offering chemo, but it'll be done metronomically based on tissue assays. There will be offerings of some type of form of radiation, but it will also be done fractionated and metronomically, as well as paired with things like hyperthermia and other stress points to the cancer cell. For instance, having them in a low glycemic state is what sensitizes the cancer cells to the radiation. So we'll be reimagining standard of care. We'll be modernizing, frankly, standard of care, as well as bringing in well-vetted, comprehensive, integrative therapies without leaving any stone unturned. We will be doing the deep dive with you. That's what I'm interested in. And when I go to spend, $20,000, $30,000 a year out of my own pocket to go and educate myself, damn right I don't take it kindly when someone calls themselves, an expert in this area that hasn't even bothered to put in the time, the energy, or frankly, live it to the level that I have. So I feel very confident when I'm helping people understand this. And to this day, I train conventional oncologists as well in this. I'm passionate about this. It's probably pretty clear that this is something very near and dear to my heart. And I'm also an avid learner. And every day I learn something new. And every patient teaches me something new. And every provider teaches me something new. And we have a long way to go in this country. People are so far ahead of us in other parts of the world, so far ahead of us. And we are so egotistical to think that we have it figured out here. We're 36th in health outcomes worldwide, for crying out loud, with the most expensive healthcare. And yet our cancer stats are no better than anybody else. And in fact, cancer is becoming the primary cause of death in the United States. It's expected to overrun cardiovascular disease before 2030. And the World Health Organization expects cancer to affect half the population in their lifetime. Those are not acceptable stats to me. So damn right I'm passionate, because the system we have isn't working at all. It's not, at least when you talk to the people who are dealing with it, you talk to people whose families are left behind, they're screaming that. It's the people new to the game that are still kind of misaligned and frankly Pollyannaed and bullied or lied to step into a system they think is going to somehow have the answer for them. It has some, but you need to take on a more active role to get the full comprehensive picture for yourself,
right,
to change the outcomes.
Right. And that's what we're here for, because it's your responsibility to take responsibility and to put this healing team together, because the standard of care is not going to hand it over to you. They don't give you your pad of paper when you sign in and say, here's your coach, here's your naturopathic doctor. This is the one that's going to help you get to the bottom of this and heal and figure out what contributed to this. That doesn't happen. It's on your plate. It's your responsibility to do that. And you have to have a healing team. It's a non-negotiable, not in the world that we live in now. It is just, it's not a privilege. It's not a benefit. It's not icing. It's a non-negotiable critical piece to your healing.
And to speak to that piece, I recognize the amount of time, energy, money that takes to get that team around. That is also why we're creating this hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is everybody currently has to piecemeal it all together from different corners of the world. There are so many therapies we can no longer even have access to in this country that we use forever, as far as IV therapies, like IV curcumin, things like that. Most of the things that I have used in my toolbox over the last 20 years of practice have now gone away in the United States. I have to send patients now to Canada, to Mexico, to Germany, to Malaysia. And guess what? That's BS, because guess what? Less than 40% of Americans have passports. And most of the patients who come to see somebody like me are too sick to even get on an airplane to travel across the country, much less out of the country. And, who wants to be trying to fight for their life in, Turkey, for crying out loud, where great, you're getting some therapies that are incredibly powerful, but are you going to come home in a body bag? Like those are really harsh realities today. So that's why we're so committed to building this center, and to make a center that has multiple arms: for-profit, not-for-profit, research funded, philanthropic funded, scholarship options, insurance model, and cash model. So that basically anybody who is willing to put in the work, because this is not open for everybody. This hospital is not, come on in, we'll take care of you. No, come on and do the work. We'll help you understand where you came from. We'll help you know the path out, but it is a full, you're in the driver's seat and we're the GPS to help guide it. So it is not for the faint of heart. This is not a passive experience or a passive experiment. It is a very proactive experiment and experience to come into this center. But we're going to do our darndest to make sure that anybody who wants to put in that work will not be turned away because of finances. That's our goal. And it's going to take the collective of us to be able to do this. And so over time, when we get more, our proof of concept down, would like to be back on here to help have people understand how they can make this a reality, because we are this close. We are now in our active funding stage. This has been a 28-year dream of mine that is coming to fruition, because thank God for the Stephanies of the world who are helping patients piece it all together. But most people don't even know they need to piece it all together. And then when they start that reality, even those who do know to look for people like you or me, they realize it's overwhelming. It's too much, and it's too expensive, and it's too disjointed, and it's too all over the map. And they don't want to be in the middle of fighting with their standard of care. And we're going to have everybody. You're going to have a medical oncologist, a surgical oncologist, a radiation oncologist, along with integrative experts in oncology from every walk of life under one roof. And guess what? The standard of care therapies will be the backup singers. They're going to be in there to focus on the tumor and the tumor cell when we need to, but the terrain is what's front and center in this hospital.
What a different world this is going to be for people who are diagnosed with cancer when you actually get diagnosed in a warm, comfortable, loving environment, and you can feel, and all of your cells can feel that I am going to be okay. Whichever route this may take me, I'm going to be all right. Because I'm loved and I'm cared for and I'm supported. So much different than what we have been going decades and decades and decades.
Yeah. It gets me emotional. Yeah.
It's going to change. It's going to change cancer in every way that we are desperately needing cancer to be changed. It's going to be an example. It's going to be the new poster child of what we need to be looking for standard of care.
And just a little, so your listeners know, you will be among our official credentialed, when we have because we're putting together an official credentialed patient advocacy, like people who are like our stamp of approval of people out there being the coaches, because we need you out there. We need your seeds planted everywhere.
Yeah.
So I'm imagining you to be one of our first graduates of that program because you're already in it doing it. So let's come in and redefine it and create a focus standard, because all cancer coaches aren't created equal either.
No, they're not.
And so we're trying to create a better, standard of care within that, a new envisioned standard of care within that arena as well. So there's a level of consistency so that when you leave the center, you go back home and you have Stephanie in your back pocket to help you implement and continue running with everything you did over the 2 to 3 weeks you were at the hospital.
Because at home is a different story. You're cared when you're in the center and you're cared for, and your food is just appearing on the table.
Yeah, exactly. Or you might have helped pick it up organic gardens that day.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Yeah. So, and then you go home and you're deer in the headlights. What do I do? That's where your continuum of care comes in. That's where the coach takes you beyond.
And that's the critical piece that's missing in the model altogether.
Yeah.
And when you do if you are lucky enough to get a Stephanie in your life and you've come from the standard of care into that, that's like a deer, like, oh, this is totally new. The continuity, the fluidity, the seamlessness of it all is going to be so different for people as well. So there's never a sense of, who do I listen to? What's true? What's not true? What do I do? How do I know? Because no moment will you ever be guessing.
Right.
Every moment you will be educated and empowered. Every moment, every person on your team has their own expertise, but also has a collective philosophy and understanding of what to focus on for you first and primarily, with the understanding that, there's some need for some cytotoxic, direction, some tumor and tumor cell approach. But that, interestingly enough, because we see it in the data, that if you treat the terrain, oftentimes the tumor will go bye-bye or stabilize or go into a quiescent state. I mean, that's pretty potent stuff right there. And so we're going to be showing, because we're also a research institute, via all of our different metrics of testing and diagnostic imaging, even though we've seen it in all of our practices collectively for decades now, we will have a single repository of that data being collected, which we also expect to inform all future of medicine worldwide. No small undertaking.
Yeah, that's a pretty big plate you have there.
Sure it is. And it's, there was I can't remember who was talking about it this week. They're basically the people whose dreams come to fruition are those who dream beyond big, like humongous. Because most of us settle like, I can't think too big. I'll fail if I don't take this on. Folks, dream big, go big or go home. It's like, this is the place. If you're told it can't be done, then tell them to get out of your way so you can do it.
Move, right? Move.
Exactly.
Yep. So that's where we're going to leave you on your healing team. You have to dream big for your healing team. Okay. Please, you have to become the CEO of you. It is your responsibility. It's your responsibility to find us so we can help you and collectively get you on the right path.
Absolutely.
Dr. Nasha is at drnasha.com, and she works with your medical physician or oncologist to help you get the comprehensive assessing, testing, and addressing so that you can actually heal.
Nailed it.
We look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks. Thrive on, everybody.
Thanks for watching the Theta Living Show. Please like and subscribe to our channel to learn more about cancer and cannabis, 2 things you need to know about.